Welcome to History Reborn AI. What does an old photograph choose to remember? And what does it choose to bury? History keeps the myth. It hides the price behind every gaze. Tonight, 20 American women return from faded prints and forgotten negatives, their faces restored, their silence broken. Behind each portrait waits a life shaped by war, prejudice, power, and pain the camera never captured. Stay until number 1, where a celebrated face leads directly into a mystery history still cannot solve. Let this journey change how you see the woman behind every legend. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Number 20. A studio photograph from 1890 shows her hair pinned high, her eyes locked on the camera with a confidence rare for her century. This was Nellie Bly, born Elizabeth Jane Cochran, working inside the roaring newspaper world of late 19th century America. The public remembers a fearless reporter who circled the globe in just over 70 days. But before that triumph, she faked madness to enter an asylum on Blackwell's Island, living among cold, hunger, and cruelty, beside patients with no voice at all. Her career was built by vanishing into a place the world had already forgotten. She walked into a place built for the voiceless and nearly lost her own voice, bringing it to light. Number 19. She stands beside a rifle in a photograph from the Wild West show, medals gleaming, expression perfectly calm. This was Annie Oakley, born Phoebe Ann Mosey, a sharpshooter who became a symbol of frontier independence. The public remembers a woman who almost never missed her target, but after a train accident left her injured. Newspapers printed a lie claiming she had stolen to buy drugs, and Annie spent years fighting to reclaim her name in court. She could command a rifle before thousands of strangers, yet she could not silence the ink printed against her. She hit every mark on stage. The deepest wound came from a story that never happened at all. Number 18. A weathered photograph shows a woman in trousers and a wide hat, a rifle at her side, a stance the era called unwomanly. This was Calamity Jane, born Martha Jane Cannery, a figure of the mining camps and wagon trails of the American frontier. Legend remembers a fearless scout bound to Wild Bill Hickok by loyalty and myth. Behind the tale sat poverty, unstable work, addiction, and final years spent selling her own legend just to survive. The line between the true woman and the invented character grew impossible to trace. Strip away the shows, tradition claims, and something plainer remains. History kept her nickname. The woman who carried it slowly disappeared beneath it. Number 17. A quiet portrait from around 1870 shows a young woman lit by window light, years before the world knew her name. This was Louisa May Alcott, author of Little Women, a novel that gave readers a warm and independent household to imagine. The public remembers the cheerful hearth of the March family. Behind it stood a woman writing endlessly to pay debts and support her family. Her health weakened for life by mercury treatments received while nursing soldiers during the Civil War. She wrote of home and belonging, while her own life stayed bound to obligation. She gave the world a house to dream of returning to, and spent her life writing to keep it from falling. Number 16. A striking portrait shows a young woman holding a violin, dressed in garments that speak two cultures at once. This was Zitkála-Šá, also known as Gertrude Simmons Bonin, a Yankton, Dakota writer, musician, and activist. The public remembers a voice that used English, the language of assimilation, to defend Native rights. Around age 8, she was sent to a mission boarding school where her hair, language, and customs were stripped away, a wound that echoed through her writing for life. She had to master the culture that hurt her in order to speak for the one it tried to erase. They taught her their language. They could never stop her from using it to expose their silence. Number 15. A photograph shows a young woman in a leather flight jacket, staring into the lens with quiet defiance. This was Bessie Coleman, an aviator of African American and Cherokee descent in aviation's early years. The public remembers the first black woman to earn a pilot's license, proof the sky could open, where society closed every door. American flight schools refused to train her, so she learned French and crossed the ocean for her wings, then returned to a country still unwilling to hire her, forced into dangerous stunt shows to fund a dream school of her own. She died in a crash before that school was built. The sky gave her a place without borders. The sky also kept her there forever. Number 14. A photograph captures a young woman with a steady, unblinking gaze, standing before the gates of the White House. This was Alice Paul, an activist who turned the fight for women's suffrage into direct confrontation with the federal government. The public remembers a fierce strategist behind the Silent Sentinels' protests. Behind that image sat prison, where Alice went on hunger strike and was force-fed through a tube, an ordeal recorded dozens of times during a single imprisonment. She fought for women's right to control their own choices while her own body was seized and controlled by force. They tried to break her will by invading her body. That cruelty made their silence impossible to sustain. Number 13. A grave portrait shows a small, composed woman whose eyes carry more endurance than her frame suggests. This was Clara Barton, remembered as the angel of the battlefield, founder of the American Red Cross. The public remembers a healer who reached the wounded near the front lines of the Civil War. Behind that image lay years of trauma from witnessing carnage up close, and later, bitter criticism over how she ran the organization she built, ending in resignation after an internal struggle for control. She could run toward a battlefield to save lives, yet could not fully protect her own legacy from politics that followed her home. She built a symbol of mercy. In the end, its door closed behind her. Number 12. An official portrait shows an elaborately dressed First Lady, her expression heavy beneath an ornate hairstyle. This was Mary Todd Lincoln, wife of President Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War. The public remembers a volatile, extravagant First Lady in a divided nation. Behind that image stood a woman who lost child after child, watched her husband assassinated beside her, and outlived 3 of her 4 sons before her surviving son had her declared insane and committed, though she was later released. Her grief was continually reinterpreted by the public as evidence of an unstable mind. History called her unstable. Few asked how much a person can lose before composure becomes impossible to hold. Number 11. A late-life portrait shows a stern, silver-haired woman whose gaze suggests a struggle longer than any single lifetime. This was Susan B. Anthony, one of the most recognized faces of the American suffrage movement. The public remembers a woman who spent decades demanding the vote. Behind that image sat an arrest for casting an illegal ballot, a trial, a guilty verdict, and a fine she vowed she would never pay. Susan died years before the 19th Amendment was finally ratified into law, the victory she had spent her whole life building toward. She spent her life knocking on democracy's door. When it finally opened, she was no longer there to walk through it. Number 10. A dignified photograph shows a composed woman surrounded by young students, her expression steady and unwavering. This was Mary McLeod Bethune, an educator, civil rights organizer, and advisor to presidents, remembered as the founder of a school that grew into Bethune-Cookman College. Behind that image stood a childhood as one of 17 children, born to formerly enslaved parents in a segregated society that denied black children even basic schooling. Every step forward required convincing those in power to invest in students their own system had already discarded. She was never handed a place in history. She built the room herself, opened the door, and led others inside. Number 9. A photograph captures a young, uncertain gaze that would later become one of the most recognized faces in American public life. This was Eleanor Roosevelt, First Lady during the Great Depression and the Second World War, later a diplomat and human rights advocate. The public remembers a woman who spoke, wrote, and traveled independently, helping shape the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Behind that image lay early orphanhood and a marriage deeply wounded after she discovered her husband's relationship with another woman. The couple remained bound by politics, but the old intimacy never fully returned. Betrayal took from her a marriage she once believed in. From that emptiness, she built a voice that finally belonged only to herself. Number 8. A photograph shows a woman with gardenias in her hair, her eyes carrying a sorrow that seems older than her years. This was Billie Holiday, born Eleanor Fagan, a jazz singer whose voice could turn a simple line into an open wound. The public remembers Lady Day, whose recording of Strange Fruit became one of American music's most powerful protests against racial violence. Behind the stage lights lay a childhood scarred by hardship, abusive relationships, addiction, and relentless pursuit by the law. Fame never protected Billie. At times, it only placed her collapse under a brighter spotlight. America loved her voice. Too few stood close enough to catch the woman behind it before she fell. Number 7. A quiet photograph shows a composed woman seated near a bus window, her calm expression hiding a lifetime of preparation. This was Rosa Louise Macaulay Parks, a civil rights activist whose refusal ignited the Montgomery bus boycott. The public remembers a tired seamstress who simply refused to give up her seat. But Rosa had spent years as a secretary for the NAACP, investigating racial injustice long before that bus ride. The comforting story of a suddenly weary woman made history easier to tell, but it erased her years of deliberate courage. She became a national symbol, yet her true self was reduced to one moment in one seat. She only sat still after a lifetime spent standing firm. Number 6. A luxurious studio portrait shows a woman in fine clothing, seated with the bearing of someone who commands a room. This was Madam C.J. Walker, born Sarah Breedlove, a self-made entrepreneur and philanthropist. The public remembers one of America's first self-made female millionaires who built an empire of hair care products for Black women. Behind that image stood a childhood shaped by formerly enslaved parents, early orphanhood, and years laboring as a washerwoman for meager pay. Success came from a lifetime of brutal work, yet she died young, only in her 50s. She rose from a rented laundry room to a mansion, her triumph arriving too late to grant her many years inside the world she had built. Number 5. A Sharp's studio portrait shows a woman with a direct, unflinching gaze and unmistakable dignity. This was Ida Bell Wells Barnett, an investigative journalist and civil rights leader who fought lynching with evidence and print. The public remembers a pioneering reporter who dismantled the excuses local newspapers and officials used to justify racial terror. Behind that image lay a childhood born into slavery, and later, the destruction of her newspaper office in Memphis after she began publishing her findings, forcing permanent exile from the city where she had built her career. To speak the truth, Ida had to surrender her home and her safety. They burned her newspaper to force her silence. From those ashes, her voice carried further. Number 4. A famous photograph shows a young girl's hand beneath flowing water, a moment the world never stopped retelling. This was Helen Adams Keller, a writer, speaker, and activist blind and deaf from early childhood. The public remembers a child who learned to communicate through her teacher, Anne Sullivan, a tale that usually ends the moment language arrives. Behind that ending stood a grown woman who became a fierce advocate for labor rights, women's suffrage, pacifism, and social equality. Views later versions of her story quietly erased. Society celebrated the child who found words, yet showed little interest in what the grown woman chose to say. They loved the moment she found language. They forgot the years she spent challenging them with it. Number 3. A carte de visite photograph shows a composed woman seated with her knitting, a portrait she herself chose to sell. This was Sojourner Truth, born Isabella Baumfree, an abolitionist and women's rights speaker who endured roughly 28 years in slavery. The public remembers her as the voice behind the speech known as "Ain't I a Woman?" The most famous version was published years after it was delivered, written in a Southern dialect, inconsistent with a woman raised speaking Dutch, and the original words remain disputed among historians. She controlled her own image through photography, yet others later placed different words inside her mouth. She escaped chains and sold her own likeness on her own terms. Even then, others tried to speak for her. Number 2. A rare portrait shows a face far younger than the elderly image usually printed in textbooks. This was Harriet Tubman, born Araminta Ross, guide of the Underground Railroad, who repeatedly returned south to lead the enslaved to freedom. The public remembers her wartime service to the Union, following her escape from bondage. Behind that image lay a severe head injury suffered as a young woman, leaving lifelong pain and sudden losses of consciousness. Freedom was never enough for Harriet alone. Each return south placed her hard-won liberty and her life in danger for the sake of others still trapped in darkness. She reached freedom herself. Instead of resting in the light, Harriet turned back into the shadows to find those left behind. Number 1. A confident photograph shows a woman in a leather jacket, standing beside the aircraft that would carry her into legend. This was Amelia Mary Earhart, the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic, a symbol of ambition without limits. The public remembers a pioneer chasing horizons no woman had claimed before her. Near the end of a flight around the world, Amelia and navigator Fred Noonan vanished searching for tiny Howland Island in the Pacific. Her final transmissions, navigation troubles, and a massive search yielded no certain answer, and though theories followed, none have been confirmed. The same hunger that carried Amelia past every boundary led her to an ocean with no horizon to guide her home. The sky made her a legend. The ocean made her a question still unanswered. The faded photographs remain, but the eyes inside them still hold their weight. Which face haunted you the most tonight? History is never finished returning to the light.